Okay? So now what we come up to now is the 1599. 1599 are shipwrecks in Peru. You said Bolivia, and I'm glad you said that. Carrying slaves. They call them the Maroons. These are the Maroons. Now my dad descends from Jamaica, called Portsmouth.
Oh man, yeah. I wanted that's a whole another show we can get into with the Maroons.
Exactly, but what I want to do an overlapping thing where you see Maroons in Colombia, Maroons in Cuba, Maroon, but the
bad boys.
Yeah. So the first
Maroons were the bad boys.
And the first shipwreck you see, 1599, comes from the Sea Maroons getting transported over to somewhere. Shipwreck, the Maroons get off, they kill the Europeans, they mate with the Native Americans. This is the Senegambia Wolof Muslims. What did the crown do in Mexico? They get pissed and they say this is jihad. Even in Spain, they're talking about something that's happened in Peru, in the Cortez and Montezuma. They're looking at this as this is our battle with the Moors. Muslims against Christians, even in Spain, even here in the Americas. Everything was about the religious and the cultural war. The Maroons wasn't nothing to be dealt with.
Yeah,
they killed a lot
of we free here.
Yeah, and they killed.
Hey, there wasn't nothing to be fucked with. Yeah, like Wu-Tang.
Exactly. So they killed a lot of the Europeans, and they made it with the Native Americans. And a lot of things that I'm trying to demystify is to say, you said the Aztec were dark-skinned people. Now, a lot of the Moors that come say, well, we were already over here. We need to address that because a lot of the Moors give this thing a black eye. The brothers who are conscious of being Moors, that's what I'm saying. Because we are Moors in North America, black people that were here through slavery or whatever. Well, DNA-wise, like Dana Reynolds Marnich says that we're all linked to West Africa, different parts of West Africa. But when the shipwreck came, then this is when you see a lot of battles, and a lot of the slave records are in Florida because the Spain owned portions of Florida, the whole Florida. Spain owned portions of Colombia, Spain owned portions of Mexico. Now you have Moors or black people escaping from Carolinas and Georgia to run to Florida to escape because the Spanish ran slavery differently. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like chattel slavery. It was plantation slavery and domestic slavery.
Chime in real quick for the people watching. Yeah. The importance of the sea.
Yeah.
In the last episode, you touched on the origin of Moor in the maritime.
Exactly.
The importance of sea in our presence here prior to slavery and what was being traded to build up. Because before we get to chattel slavery and the trade of humans, there were other trades going on that didn't involve humans, didn't involve black people. That's where we get into that pre-Columbian and understanding. One thing Sartama touches on is in Guinea, and he really makes a big deal about the boats and us being navigators. I'll just say the word navigators in that maritime
seafaring race.
When it's like pulling up, right?
Yeah.
I'm pulling up. Where you come from?
Exactly.
With that.
Yeah.
How did you learn? And another thing is us, and I'll credit this with the study. They didn't use the word Moor. They said Moroccan, North African, understanding that the world was not flat.
Exactly.
So that ties into the pre-Columbian, knowing that I can reach certain places without the myth of falling off the edge of the earth. I just wanted to bring that up. So we're talking about
in pre-Columbian, we were already trading with the so-called Native Americans or the Indians, spices and golds and a different type of fabric. So we already had the history of coming here way prior to Mansa Musa sending 200 ships
or before
off.
The expulsion of the Native Americans, I guess, with disease and everything. It was a shortage of them.
Yeah, with different pathogens that they were dying off with. But the important thing that I want to get over is we're linking African American history to the Moorish paradigm in Spain, and we're threading and finding the through line to show the case, to one, that we're related to those people, we're Moors or we were the Moriscos. Two, the Native Americans, so-called Native Americans, have been here for a while, but they are African as well. At a time that it's so old, it's time immemorial when they came over here. So we are the same people. to the point where whenever we had shipwrecks with Wolof, Senegambia, or other different type of Tuareg Moors on the ship, the Native Americans would kill the Europeans and leave a lot of the Africans living. And this is in Ivan Van Sertima's book, and this is in Jane Lander's book, talking about the African, Latin, Spanish prisons. That's how we get into Florida. So when you talk about Colombia, we took a trip to Colombia in January. We went to Cali, Medellin, Bogota, and Cartagena. We ended up in Cartagena. Outside of Cartagena, what I would learn when I was there studying is they had a place called Sombo, Cilicia. And that was an outside African town where they spoke multiple languages and created their own language, from Spanish to Arabic to whatever. Now what's happening in Colombia, Mexico, is an African uprising in consciousness, and they're tapping into it. That's why I recorded on my Instagram them doing African dances, because it's a consciousness, kind of like our consciousness hit with Public Enemy, with that African conscious. But they would tell you that these Sombelicia was Moros or Morenos or Wolof Senegambian Muslims.
And this is in Medellin?
This is in 1520, and they battled from 1520 to 1546 with the Spanish and linking in with the Native Americans in Colombia outside of what we call Cartagena. This goes on all throughout Colombia. And the interesting thing is we've been a seafaring race. You'll see more of our presence on the coastal lines in South America, North America, the adjoining islands. They call it the isthmus or the archipelago. This is a series of islands. So wherever you find water at or coastal lines, you'll find a blacker presence. Now, when you go in excursion up into these places, you get it kind of get tenuous, but you got to search a little harder for the Moorish or the African presence. But you see more on the coastal line because of how sugar grew, how the plantations, all of that comes into play, or why we were on these coastlines coming in well before Columbus. Now, the interesting thing is they have a scholar by the name of C. Eric Lincoln, who was a big proponent and he was very critical of the Nation of Islam. And he used to meet with Elijah Muhammad. He used to debate with Malcolm X. You can YouTube or look up some of C. Eric Lincoln's interviews with Malcolm X. He goes back and forth about Islam because his background is religion. But he states in his book that Queen Isabella, King Ferdinand had Spanish explorers over here. In the letter, he points out.
Over here meaning?
Up in the Americas, South America, because Columbus didn't come to the Bahamas and things like that. He saw mosques on Bahama hilltops. But what they were saying in the letter was, try not to bring so many black Moors with you on this exploration, because it's at the Christian cost, because the black Moors are converting too many of the Native Americans. So what I'm saying is the way we're touching it is, the Africans or the Moorish presence came by exploration, by military allies with these Spanish or these European people, military enemies, domestic slavery, and plantation slavery. We're not talking about chattel slavery because we're talking about the Spanish. We're not talking about English or European. We're talking about why people speak Spanish in Texas, Florida, Cuba, Brazil, Peru, Bolivia, all of that, because of this presence of Spain, and then the wars coming out of Spain, carrying over. And the interesting thing about that is our relationship with Spain gets different in the 1500s in Florida. So you see the amalgamation with the Moors or the African people with the Native Americans being helped by the quote-unquote Spanish to fight against these Europeans. Andrew Jackson and his brigade at Fort Negro with the Yamasee, the Seminole Wars, the 3 Seminole Wars. But we amalgamated a lot, and we found refuge inside of these Indian camps.
And one of the other things is around that same time, and that sticking with that theme of Central Mexico, the Aztec were the dominant force until Cortez, Hernan, came around. Now, I want to say he's from Medellin. Cortez is. So that's when that empire fell to the Spaniards. The Aztec, when Cortez came around. And that's around the 1521. And then we started leading up and getting into those 1600s. Now, touching on, of course, when you say Florida,
Yeah.
I started thinking about the presence of like the Seminole and all of the Native American presence there in Florida. But also what we know as the transatlantic or the triangular slave trade.
Wasn't the triangular slave trade.
So the phases, before you tap it, because now we're talking about the Portuguese.
There you go.
And taking goods from Europe to Africa, phase one. Remember phase one?
Yeah.
We weren't talking about human. Phase two was going back and grabbing the people, enslaving Africans and bringing them to America.
Yeah.
Phase three was the return of Europe to produce from plantations. So now we get the force to work, and now we start talking about the trade of the tobacco, the sugar,
Yeah.
the cotton, and all of that. Because from what I understand, the what didn't initially start as human, quote unquote, slave trade was just the goods. But then, you know, with the Europeans being who the Europeans are, saying we need a workforce.
Yeah.
Now to get that workforce, that's where we get, we can enslave these Africans.
We're talking about plantation slavery.
Plantation slavery.
So we're not talking about chattel slavery. We're talking about Spanish. They're under Roman law. How people become slaves and still enslaved through the father bloodline. Cortez is very important. But before we go into that, you're talking about tobacco. We're talking about
and that's
sugar.
just transatlantic.
Exactly.
That's just that what we call that transatlantic middle passage.
And I want to debunk some of the things
on the slave ship.
So what are some of the misconceptions of the slave trade, and what are the consequences of the misconception of the slave trade? That's the question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, transatlantic meaning across the Atlantic. Well, we know that in the 1600s, because that's where we're at now,
Mm-hmm.
in Craig Stevens' book called Ebony and Ivy, how the Ivy Leagues were established, he has notes that the first African that was on Harvard campus as a slave to a student, because you know back in the day you bring your slave with you like he's a laptop. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the brother is called the Moor. He gets there through the Caribbean slave trade, trading 10 Indians for 3 Moors. So you're talking about debunking this transatlantic slave trade.
I'm glad you.
We're talking about Indians being traded to Europe and Spain.
Yeah.
We're talking about Indians being traded to Caribbeans. We're talking about Indians being traded to Colombia.
Yeah.
And that was the reason that they did that, because one, not just because the Indians with the pathogens and them dying off and being able to work more rigorous things, but the other one was to discombobulate and confuse you because they knew the territory.
If you're watching this on YouTube, man, hey, y'all, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. This is Gentleman's History Hour.